Hello and welcome back to another episode of NT Movie Reviews, coming at you online and in print format at nicktiffany.com, on YouTube and all the podcast platforms at NT Movie Reviews, as well on all the social media platforms at NT Movie Reviews. As we're kicking off another exciting year with our SIFF 2025 coverage, we begin with the film Color Book, which sees a devoted single father, Lucky, adjusting to life after his wife's passing while raising his son Mason, who has Down syndrome. They embark on a journey through Metro Atlanta to attend their first baseball game together. It is a beautiful and quiet portrait of fatherhood and resiliency as love takes on many shapes and forms. And today I have the pleasure of being joined by writer and director David Fortune. David, thank you so much for being here.
Yes.
Congratulations on the film. How does it feel to see your vision come into life now that it's starting to play film festivals?
Oh, great question. It's a beautiful feeling. When you sit down to create a story, first you're making it for yourself. You're making it to satisfy the stories that you want to see out in the world. But, when you go through that process of transitioning it from the screenplay to the screen, and you're seeing all the responses and all the people that the film speaks to, it's so heartwarming. It's so humbling. And I have nothing but gratitude to the response that's been taking place regarding the movie. So it's been a beautiful experience going to different cities and seeing that people are responding to the film in the way that I did when I first wrote the screenplay.
That's so wonderful to hear. And I know you mentioned the reactions from cities. I know you screened the film recently in Atlanta. You shot the film in Atlanta. I listened to an interview and you were speaking about the importance of, filming where you're from, showing different parts of the city, making sure that you keep film in Atlanta alive,
Yeah.
using extras, using actors from the area. What was it like to share that film with that audience? Taking it home almost in a sense. And
Oh man, it was a party. It was a party, man. Because there's not many stories or films that is reflecting the Atlanta community. Oftentimes we see stories taking place in Los Angeles or New York, but rarely do you see stories that's based in the city of Atlanta. And I know everyone's familiar with our tax credits and doing a lot of productions within the city of Atlanta. But again, those stories aren't based on the people. Those stories aren't based on the community and the residents that live there. And so for me to make a film that is a reflection of this community that I grew up in, to me, it was powerful. And just to see, everyone's response, in real time and them seeing themselves on screen was powerful. So it was a party, man. I think for me, it was just even after the screening and just talking to, everyone in the city. It felt like there was a line stretched outside of theater. But it was beautiful just to engage with everyone one-on-one and to hear their thoughts. So I loved every moment of the screening and the premiere.
that's so wonderful to hear. And I think you're absolutely right. As far as the tax credits go, you always see Georgia popping up in a lot of films,
Yeah.
but you don't see Atlanta. You would never see the city, especially the metro area, like we get a really good look at in this film.
Yeah,
Uh,
man, like you would see, people would shoot Detroit in Atlanta.
there,
It's like people shoot New York in Atlanta. I'm like, you have your own spaces. And for me, I just want to make sure I do justice.
Absolutely. I think you absolutely did. Something
Thank
I
you.
was listening to when you were discussing kind of the evolution of the story. I'd love to hear just a little bit about that. I know perhaps the Genesis was telling the story of a single black father in that area. And from what I can gather, you were having conversations with people. And at some point, there was a discussion or the idea of discussing what it was like raising children with Down syndrome, whether that was as a single parent or how that just almost adds this extra layer to fatherhood,
Mhm.
to parenthood.
Yeah. So, just to give you a background context, so I worked as a camp counselor for children who have Down syndrome during the summer of, I think it was 2013, 2014, back when I was in college.
Okay.
And so having that experience and having a connection to the community gave me a perspective, that these stories exist, these stories are out there. Um, but, when making this film, I just really wanted to tell a story of a black father and a son, and just to see what experience do we have, as far as, spending time with them in the day of their lives. And I really want this film to be more of a window, not so much exposition of what does Lucky do for work, where does Mason go to school, but just say, hey, we're just spending a day with the father and his son. And whatever experience, whatever emotions that we feel from that, then that's just what we take home with us. This is more of an experience rather than a story. But as far as just growing that to the idea of incorporating the Down syndrome community, it really just started by having conversations with parents who's raising children who's along the spectrum of Down syndrome, autism, and it goes on and on. And hearing that perspective was something I recognized that we weren't really seeing in film, let alone seeing stories of Black fathers on the screen as well. And
Absolutely.
so I wanted to make sure that, that experience was taken care of and treated with a sense of respect and approach it with a sense of duty. And so just having conversations with parents who's raising children with Down syndrome, I remember we would just speak on the phone from sun up to sundown, it felt like. But it wasn't research. It was a conversation. It was
Sure.
therapy. It was engagement that led into this natural formulation of the story of a Black father raising a son who has Down syndrome. And so I just wanted to make sure that it came organically and that it wasn't forced that it's like, hey, let's make this movie. But I was only going to write it. I was only going to make it if it felt right and if it paid tribute to those parents.
Sure. Well, thank you for sharing that. That's really wonderful. And in this film, you touch on a lot of issues, a lot of important
Mm,
issues that I think plague men at any point in their lives. Being
mm,
okay enough to admit that you're not okay. And in this
mm,
particular situation, Lucky really feels like he's got to put on this face for the world as he's
mm.
navigating taking on more responsibility now as a single father, but also someone as a caretaker as well.
Yep.
And all the while, he's in mourning. He
Mm.
hasn't necessarily taken that time for himself yet. And so I was curious for yourself, has there been a moment where maybe you felt a bit underwater, kind of like Lucky did? I know the filmmaking process sometimes can be a bit
Mm.
isolating, and it's like you're the father of the film almost.
Yeah.
Everybody's looking to you here.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, in life and through film, you feel underwater, right? You deal with life circumstances when it comes to family, when it comes to finances, when it comes to even school. You just feels like the weight of the world is just almost like just pressing on you, and you don't know where else to relieve that. And sometimes you bottle that in and you struggle with that. And that's kind of what Lucky's going through as well, is that like the weight of the world of losing his wife, raising his son, trying to be, a caregiver, but also making time for himself, right? And not knowing where to place that and not knowing how to express it. And I think in society, we're not taught, we are expected to, hey, feel, be comfortable with your emotions, but no one ever teaches us how to express it. No one teaches us how to release it and share it in a comfortable space. And I feel like with this movie, I didn't want to give a fantasy of that. I wanted to give a true portrayal of what does it like to feel like you're underwater? What does it feel like to be under pressure, but not knowing where to go or how to even share it? So
Hmm.
we have the scene with Lucky and Meech, where Meech
Ah,
asks him, how you doing? And Lucky lies and says, I'm good.
you can see it on his face.
Exactly.
The
And we as the
struggle.
audience know it, right? We as the audience say, I know you're going through something, but it's just so hard to share because there's a lot going on, and when it comes to feeling underwater from a film perspective, as a director, you always feel underwater, right? Because a lot of decisions are made by you and you have to answer 1,000 questions per day. And some, questions you don't even know the answer to. You didn't even think of it. And you got to give it out on the fly. And I think about there was an interview that Stanley Kubrick had where he shares a conversation between him and Steven Spielberg. And in that conversation, they asked, what's the hardest thing about being a director? And Stanley Kubrick and Steven Spielberg, they shared that it's just getting out the car. Is the hardest thing about being a director is getting out the car. And I remember feeling that some days on Color Book, where it's like, I have this world ahead of me. We got to shoot on MARTA. We got to shoot on a train station. We have a kid and we got to make sure he's out on time. And, there's chaos. And I'm just trying to find the strength just to get out the car, you
Sure.
know. And at some point you do. And at some point you recognize it's like, you know what, there's people counting on me. Even though I feel this way, I still have a job to do. And that's the same way Lucky feels, is that Yes, my wife has died. Yes, I'm left to raise a son by myself, but I still have a job to do nonetheless.
Absolutely. It reminds me of a phrase I'd heard recently, fear. It's an inch deep, but it's a mile long. And
Ooh,
taking that, I can understand that. I know that it can be paralyzing sometimes, but it's that
yeah,
I got to get up and go. You got to
yeah,
do it, embrace it, and
yeah.
I think you did a wonderful job. The
Thank you.
performances in the film, Lucky, he's played masterfully by William Catlett, and then
Yeah.
Mason, his son, is played beautifully and so charmingly by Jeremiah Daniels. I've got to know, working with them on this film, how much of their characters that we see are straight from the page? And was there anything that, as the two of them started to work together and work with you, that did those characters evolve at all?
Yeah, my approach with directing Will and Jeremiah was simple. Allow them to exist within the frame. Don't force it, don't press your perspective on them.
Mm.
They're the characters. He's Lucky, he's Mason. They know them better than I know them. So allow them to exist rather than to apply any perspective or theory that, hey, you have to be this type of father, or hey, you have to be this type of son. We're trying to
Mm.
do this, we're trying to do that. I said, hey, just teach him how to write his name.
Yeah.
Teach him. And then it's like, all right, everybody get your ones, let the camera roll. And they knew the emotions of the scene. But
Mm.
for me, I wasn't so focused on them hitting the line of dialogue or hitting this beat because I wanted to feel true. I wanted to feel organic and I wanted them to have their space to interact. And so when the audience sees them, they see a reaction, a connection, a back and forth that feels like they're peeking into their lives. They're not performing for the people watching the movie. And so for me as a director, I kind of just took a step back and just allowed them to exist. And at times I had to come in, and guide it a little bit. But for the
Sure.
most part, it was about hitting the emotions of the scene rather than the words on the screenplay.
Okay. I love that. And it really does come across as organic. It does feel like you are peeking into that window, observing the tough, the good. And I think what really hammered it in for me, the older you get, perspective builds everything. You think of
Yes.
whether it was your parents, you think of people and how they used to treat you, maybe, or the way you
Yeah.
looked at a
Mm.
situation when you were younger. My parents didn't care about me because they didn't take me to this one thing. And
Mm.
all the while you're watching this film and you're watching Lucky battle Herculean odds just trying to get Mason to that game. You
Yeah.
know, the idea, and I think that's what works so well about the Atlanta metro area as well, is this is not a story where these guys are just calling an Uber, hop into the game, and everything's okay. It is not a like everything's convenient. Everybody in the world has access to all these things and wealth and whatever it might be. It's not that story. You're watching, multiple modes of public transportation. You're watching them
Mm.
for Mason, he may not know everything that his father is going through trying to get him there.
Yeah.
But for Lucky, we see that and we feel that. And it's one of those things inside where I'm like, oh, I can think of moments now in my own life where
Mm.
I didn't have that perspective then, but
Mm.
wow, my parents were really trying to do something big for me there, and I couldn't understand that. And I was curious, just that moment going to the baseball game, is there a memory that you had, whether it was with a family member, a parent, a friend, something pivotal kind of like that when you were young, where someone took you to a game, someone, it could
Mm.
be baseball, football, or an event maybe that just kind
Mm.
of helped shape a little bit of who you are that you can think of.
Mm. Yes. So, wow, now that you mention it, like the journey of Lucky Mason going to the baseball game was inspired by me and my sister.
Okay.
So my sister, she used to take me and my younger brother to Centennial Olympic Park for fireworks on 4th of July. And so that would be an annual thing. And so we would have to get on the train at MARTA, take the buses, go through the whole public transportation system just to get to Centennial Olympic Park, which is in downtown Atlanta, to watch the fireworks on 4th of July every single year. And that used to always be a journey. I remember one day, we're running late and I got to use the bathroom. And then so she takes me to, go use the bathroom. We use it and then we come back out and we miss the train. Now we're running late, to this fireworks showing. And I wrote that from those emotions of what it was like waiting, on the train, platform for this, train to arrive that might be 5, 10 minutes late. What do you do in the meantime? What games do you play? What jokes do you crack? But I also think about my sister's perspective of what was going on in her mind as she was taking us to the game and what
Sure.
weight she was carrying and care of me and my brothers and my sisters. And so, it was written from that perspective, the journey of it, but also the emotional weight of what my sister had to carry. He's taking us to just a simple fireworks show.
Sure. May I ask how much older was your sister at the time,
My
taking all
sister,
of you guys there?
yeah. So my sister, she used to, so I grew up with 9 siblings, but she used to just take me and my younger brother.
Okay.
Because all the other kid, because me and my younger brother were the two youngest.
Okay.
So everyone else was doing their own thing.
Sister was looking out for y'all.
Yeah, exactly. So she was maybe like, if we were 9 years, if I was 9 years old, 10 years old, she was maybe 24, 25 years old.
Okay.
Um, so she was a little bit older. She was grown and, she just wanted to take her younger brothers out to the fireworks show in downtown Atlanta.
That's beautiful. And I love hearing you speak about those fireworks and what that meant because when
Hmm.
watching the film, fireworks to me play such a big part of not only the ending, but I think some of the draw of what brings Mason to that game as well. And I
Hmm.
think that's such a beautiful moment from a parent and a kid's perspective because
Hmm.
as a parent, there's this thought, my kid wants to go to the game. I got to make sure he sees every inning. He's got to see
Yeah.
the at-bats. He's got to see everything like this. And there's almost this sense where Mason, it's like, I just want to be where the big fireworks are going off. I want to be somewhere where they're celebrating something. Of course he likes watching the game, but I don't want to call it the disconnect, but it's Lucky's beating himself up because it's like,
Yeah.
man, we're an inning in, it's already started, whatever it might be. And part of that plays into too that the fact is the journey is
Yeah.
really what a lot of the story is, and building that time and taking those moments with his son. And I love that there's a kind of natural progression as far as how he starts to understand Mason. And
Mm.
I think this can be true of a lot of artists sometimes too. And
Yes.
and and touching this side of someone you might not understand completely. You're always drawing, you're always doing something. I need you to pay attention. I need you to be a little more present. You gotta, Lucky is looking out for so many things
Yeah.
because Mason might not be able to do that for himself. And I think in some
Exactly.
ways he might not undervalue a little bit of what Mason might be capable of, but there's a beautiful moment at the end where he starts looking through his drawings. And
Yeah.
you really see the world through Mason's eyes, and you see how much he's connecting with the world around him and how much he's drawing inspiration from what's around
Yeah.
him. The balloon. For those who stay to the credits, the last little shot there is perfect. It tells their story and I think wraps it up so well. And I just for debut filmmaking, you did a masterful job with this movie.
Wow,
It
no,
is
thank you.
it's so affecting in so many ways. It's a really beautiful story.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. I wanted to ask, I was curious if there was perhaps a teeny bit of irony in the
Mm,
fact that his character's name is Lucky.
mm,
Because you keep hearing, hey Lucky, hey Lucky, hey Lucky, and it's easy to feel like at first,
mm,
I've just lost my wife. I'm not sure how I'm going to make it through the day, let alone take care of my son. The furthest
mm,
thing he probably feels is Lucky at the time, but I think through the story, the name feels a lot more fitting the more time he gets to spend with Mason and the more time he
mm.
understands the relationship that they can grow. So I was just curious if that was a purposeful choice or if that ever crossed your mind when writing the
Yeah.
character for him.
Man, I wish I was a genius.
We can pretend that you are.
And,
You are.
was intentional about that. But no, when I, build out characters' names, it usually comes from backstory. And so with Lucky's name, it actually comes from like his love of baseball.
Okay.
And, whatever team he was on as a kid when he was playing sports, they will always win. So like he was the lucky kid, like lucky, and
Okay.
it just grew on him. And then also the name also stemmed from a tragic incident that happened in his home where, he barely survived. And his mom, as a child, as an infant, said, "Boy, you lucky." And it just stuck. And so it really came from his like upbringing, and formed into just a name that people just address them by.
Okay.
But as you mentioned it, it's funny. I was when you was bringing up the name Lucky, I recognized I was like, man, we don't hear Lucky's name being called until 40 minutes into a film. And I was like, man, I didn't even think about like these characters, you're not hearing their names, you're just being with them. Of
Sure.
course we hear Mason, from the get-go,
Sure.
but it didn't resonate with me that I was like, wait a minute, when do we call him Lucky? Oh, we don't start hearing his name being called until he's on the train. So I don't know, I just thought that was fascinating and really spot on for you to bring up.
Well, no, I love to. It's always something that's so interesting to me in the artistic process when you're writing these characters, when you're discussing with actors the backstories that they build, whether it's
Mm,
something from just a name or, hey, here's a little bit about your character and what he's experienced. This is maybe why they refer to you like this.
yeah.
And so I love there's so many great moments because you're right. I think it's not till he gets on the train
Mm,
where he sees his friend there and there. What I loved about that too was some of that camaraderie as well. It's I know you're not doing well, man. And again,
mm,
for men, it's a lot harder to be vulnerable in that aspect. It's a
yeah.
lot harder to say,
Very.
Yes, I'm not doing well. Thanks for checking up on me even because you know it's important in your heart. In those moments even, I mean, I've said it before. I've said, yeah, I'm fine. There's nothing going on. I'm all good.
Mm,
And that's not true inside.
yeah.
But even having that friend who would ask that, having another man in your life who checks in like that, that in
Yep.
some cases that's kind of rare. And so I really loved seeing more than a few examples of this on film
Yeah.
because it's hard to be vulnerable, it's hard to be emotional,
It
but
is.
it is necessary to grow and to move forward, to build bigger. And again, it's hey, if it's not for you, think about Mason too. Mason's
Hmm.
got friends, he's got family that he's going to want to see. And just, it's taking that step out of the car. It's
Yeah.
taking the step out of the car.
That's true. That's
You
true.
you might feel underwater, but you have a team around you that supports you. And just kind of segueing into there, I would just love to know what was your experience like working with the team that you had, and what did you take away from this film?
Yeah, I'll say, it's something I truly live by when it comes to the making of cinema is that it takes a village. It takes a village. And I know as directors, we get so much love, we get so much praise, by critics, by fans, by audiences. And it seems like it's just us, or it's just the director creating this masterful piece, and we present it to everyone else to experience. But no, it takes a team of people coming together to accomplish one goal. And I could not have made Color Book without my amazing producers, Kaya Klingman, Kristen Uno, Autumn Bailey Ford. I couldn't have made Color Book without my EPs, two Notori Naughton Lewis, two Lewis, Joe Benford, Cors Vandiver, Van Diver. It's just continues to go on and on about, the people who came together to make this film. Chris Escobar, David Luce, the name goes on and on. I could just literally name
Hey, I
so
love
many
you giving them
people
their flowers
tribute,
though.
because again, it takes a collective to come together. And yes, having a vision is important, but having the crew, the team, the actors to come together to execute is just as important, if not more. Because you can have a great vision, but if there's no strong execution, it's going to fall flat. So when I speak to a director, the first thing I always ask them is, who's your team? Who do you have on your squad? It's like basketball or football, right? It's like, yo, yeah, you're the quarterback, but who's your wide receiver? Who's your running
Uh-huh.
back? What's your
Uh-huh.
defense like? Right? Because yeah, you could be a great quarterback, but if you don't have the surrounding pieces, then you're gonna go nowhere,
Sure.
And so as a director, I'm really focused on team building. That's my main priority. Yes, the screenplay, but also team building. And those two have to come together because without a great team, man, your vision will only be a vision.
Sure. No, I love that. And I love you giving the shout outs because I think you're absolutely right. In some cases, as a critic, it's always a joy for me to be able to speak to a director. But as someone who's grown up doing theater, who's
Yeah.
done all sorts of artistic endeavors, it does take a village. It is a
Yes.
super involved process. And so having a great team behind your back, I mean, it's really essential.
and great actors as well. There's so many times Will just carried it. Um, and so there's some scenes you see him acting, and he's acting to a pillow because Jeremiah has to get out because child actors have only a certain amount of time they can work on set.
Sure.
So, I give my flowers also, or not my flowers, but I give the flowers to my cast and crew members as well.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Before we wrap up here, I'm just curious to know, is there any story that you've got on the horizon or something that, maybe has spoken to you recently that you're curious about exploring, perhaps for
Mhm.
your next film or?
So, I can't dive in too much
Sure.
because I'm still in the process. The next theme is home. If this film is about a relationship between a father and son, the next project is about home. And that's
Okay.
all I can give.
I love it. But selfishly, I'm just glad to hear that you've got something else in the works because
Yeah.
I'm really going to be looking forward to it. And last thing, growing up in Atlanta, you a Falcons fan?
No, actually, I'm not. It's a disappointment. My family, I moved to Atlanta when I was 2 years old, and we moved from New York. And
Okay.
so my family, they had New York ties. And so I actually grew up as a Giants fan.
Okay. All right.
And so it's a weird relationship. But I root for the Falcons. I always wish them well because that's my home team.
Sure.
But it's
Sure.
just that connection as a kid because we were like always attached to like New York teams and New York Giants.
Sure.
In good and bad weather, I will always be a Giants fan.
Hey, you gotta support your team no matter what.
For
I
sure,
love
for
that. I love
sure.
that. David, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for taking the time. Look for Color Book at the Seattle International Film Festival. I
Yes.
hope if you're at the wrap party next week, I don't know if you're here long enough for
I'll be
that, but
there.
okay, well I'll look forward to meeting you in person then.
Same, same. All right. Thank you so
All
much,
right.
Nick.
Thank you, David. Take care.